I'm guilty, I admit it. I'm guilty of not testing my code as I should be, and I know many of you are too. In today's episode, that's what it's all about, writing tests for your code. I'm gonna break all this down through interactive code that I've created for you guys and teach you guys how you can write your own tests using unit test today in Python. Welcome back, guys, to the channel. Welcome back, guys, for another episode of Code with Josh. For obvious reasons, I'm Josh, and I'm stoked to have you all here. Before I dive into today's episode, do me a favor, hit that like button and subscribe. That really does help my channel out within the crazy YouTube algorithm. Now today, as I said, is all about learning how you can write your own tests and test your code using the unit test module. I know this is something that's been heavily requested on the channel. That's why this week's episode is all about this. And I'm going to break it all down. I've created two segments for you guys, showcasing an easier example as well as a more real-world practical scenario. And I want to use unit test to test each section of our code accordingly. And by the end of this episode, you're going to know how you can write your own tests. Stay tuned to the end because I'm going to include not only the setup process, but also the teardown process. Guys, the first link in the description is my weekly Python newsletter, where I write about topics and break down topics like this for you guys and my readers. Head on down to the first link in the description and join my weekly Python newsletter. All the links I have in the description are dedicated resources to helping you grow in this Python space. Now, on to the reason you're all here, unit test in Python. All right, so I got two examples for you guys today that I'm going to take you through and so you can learn how to test your Python code. If you've ever done any research about unit testing or testing your code, you've probably come across this example. So I want to start with this as building blocks to make sure you understand. Now, here in a main file, I've created a calculator class that just does the basic calculation operations. Add, subtract, multiply, and divide. Now let's say you're done with this class. And before you merge this code with your main code, or before you begin to use this class, we want to test it to make it sure that it's responding the way we want it to respond. So I'm done with this. Now I'm going to create another testing file. When I take you guys to the next example, it's going to be more detailed, and I'm actually going to create directories and show how you can merge the directories to run your tests. Inside here, let's import unit tests. The great thing is this is a Python module, right? That's why we're using it here. There's no need to import it. And from the main file, I want to import the class that I want to run tests on. So calculator, that's what we're going to use here, right? To run unit tests, at least the way we want to be running them, is I'm going to create a class called test calculator. Okay, and let's just say test calc, because as you saw, I just butchered the word calculator. This is going to inherit unit test and then test case. What tests do we want to be testing for? Speaking of that, let's go through that real quick. Unit test has a lot of different test cases we can test for. There might be like 12 or 14, right? I'm just going to put a few of the most common ones here. Each test we have assert. I want to assert that something is happening or true. We have assert equal or assert not equal. This is going to make sure that something equals the intended value that we want it to be, or the opposite, not equal. We have assert true. We want to make sure that something is returning true, or you have assert false. We have assert in, and then we have assert not in. And then for today's purpose, let's just say I'm going to use this one later on, assert raises. We want to make sure that a certain error is raised when something happens. That's how I'd be using this one here. Now we have other ones like assert greater than, assert less than when you want to check for those. And I mean here, yeah, I'll put them all out, the ones I can for you guys. And then you can try and use these, and maybe you have some code and you can see which one is going to work for you guys. Then there's one more I want to do here. What do I have? Is none. Let's do assert is in, and then we have not in, right? If you want to check if something is in something else. All right, so these are just some of the most commonly used ones. Now, when it comes to our class, there are two built-in methods that we can use. We have set up and we have tear down. These run automatically. So I'm going to actually remove the boilerplate that VS Code was just kind of giving me here so I can explain these. When you make a class in Python, your constructor method is init. That is automatically ran when you create an instance of that class. Setup is automatically ran when you create and run tests. This is the first method that's run, and it's ran before each test. Okay, so I'm going to actually just put here, I'm going to say set up an instance before each test. That's what this really does. Tear down is ran at the end of each test, and this does any cleanup that might be necessary. For this first example, I'm not going to really use teardown. In the next example, I am going to use it to reset everything, right? So for now, just for you guys here, I'm going to say any cleanup, okay? So every time we run a test, I want to create a new object, and this is going to be using my calculator class we imported. So each test, I'm creating a new instance to initialize that test on. You can create any tests you want here, and they're done by creating methods. Now, for unit tests to actually read that it's working, the method name does need to start with test. So def test. What do I want to test? I have an add method, so I'll just say add. And inside here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to create an object result. Let's use our object calculator, and we're going to call the add method. So as we know from the previous code, right, add takes two numbers. Let's say I want to add 6 and 6. What does that output, right? We know that's going to output 12. So result will be 12. I'm going to say self.assert equal. I need to make sure that when this result gives me back that number, it does equal 12. So I'm going to give it my result, and I'm going to tell it what should it equal. I'm going to say 12. It should equal 12. For the sake of this, I'm going to create a method to intentionally fail the test. So let me just say failure. And let's say here, let's say like 20, right? This is going to fail. It doesn't equal 20, okay? Let me just put the other ones that we're going to have here. We're going to have test subtract. And for now, I'll just say pass. We are going to have def test multiply. And then our last one will be our division test. So test divide. Okay, so each of these we're going to run a test on. Test subtract, I can just take what I have in here and let's just tweak it for subtract. So instead of add, we can say subtract. This time, let's say 50 and 10. We know that's going to equal 40. So inside here, right, we're just going to say this answer needs to be 40. Multiply, we are going to come down here. Let's just be creative. Let's say 5 and 5. That's not very creative, but yeah, 25. What should this equal? 25. Right, so I'm creating a test for each of these. Now, let's see. I have divide. I'll actually create two divides, and I'll show you why here. So let's run this one first. Let's say divide. Let's say 10 and 2. That's going to be our 5. For my other divide method, what happens when we divide by 0? Well, if you pull out your phone right now and you try and do it, you get an error. It actually says the word error. So I want to make sure that an error is raised if I try to divide by 0. So I'm going to say with self assert raises, right? What is it supposed to raise? It's supposed to raise, or I'm going to have it raise a value error, I should say.
And then I'm going to take my object here and we're going to say calc. Let's divide. Let's just say 10 and 0. Okay. So let's now run our tests. These basic tests are all done. This is going to run one time for each test. And just to kind of showcase that, I'm going to say here print setting up the test, and you'll see this run a few times. This isn't tear down. I don't need it right now. I'll show you in the next one. To run our tests, let's just say if name is equal to our main, we are just going to say unittest.main. That's it. All right. Let's run our code, and so we can examine how this test is running. There we go. Check out this. So it's quite detailed too, instead of just getting errors. You can see that it ran 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 because I have 6 tests. So I'm creating a new instance for each test. And then you can see it actually tells me what failed. Test add failure. It's an assertion error. 12 is not equal to 20. If I go up here to my test add failure, this is 12, 20, right? So that's a failed test, okay? The other one that failed, right, is 10 is not equal to 25. This is my multiplication test. Where did I do multiply? Oh, well, okay. So that's an error that I wasn't even intending for, actually. Okay. I didn't change this method to multiply. So that's good, right? I got an error for that. It ran 6 tests. I had 2 failures. If I try and run that again, then ideally I should be down to 1 test for failed. There we go. I have 1 failure. It's the same one that I intended us to have, and I ran 6 tests. Okay, that was the basic example. I want to build on this so I can show you guys more, and I want to show you guys how teardown works. Let's jump into our next testing example.
Guys, real quick, if you're getting value in today's episode, do me a favor, hit that like button and subscribe. That really does help me out. Back to it.
All right, now we're going to start to handle unit testing on a larger scale. So here I have a bank account class. This was one of the OOP projects we actually did here on the channel. I'll try and link that somewhere here, but if you're new to object-oriented programming, that's a great project to introduce this and wrap your head around with. But I've included some new things here, okay? So in my initializer, we have an account holder, that's a name, and then a balance. Okay, I have the balance property here, right? So it's always going to return our balance. I have deposit, withdraw, and our string representation, our string format of that. And you can also see here that I have some things. So negative amount error, have you heard of that? Logging info, negative amount, right? So when we run proper tests and you're working on a much larger scale project, you could be creating your own errors, which I'm going to show you here. And then you could also use the built-in logging module. You don't have to, but this just displays it in a neater format. So these errors that I'm raising here, these can be made through a class. That's really it, right? So I made a class bank account error. This is an exception. Okay, this is the parent class. And then more specifically, I have a negative amount. I just inherit that. And I have the insufficient funds error. I also just inherit that. And I'm just passing both of these. You could put stuff here, but I just want to see what the error is when it's triggered. So I don't actually have to put anything here. Okay. You can also see here that I am creating a log, and I'm just logging the info of what is happening when it's happening. So very quickly, just to kind of show you guys here, let's just create an object called wallet. This is my bank account. I will say Josh as the account holder, and let's say 25,000. I was going to say 100. Let's say wallet. Let's use withdraw, because withdraw is going to use logging as well as deposited, right? So let's try and withdraw 500. Great, so now when I run this, we should see us logging. I'm not going to raise any errors here. Okay, we can test for that, right? But here we go. There's that logging. And you don't have to do this, right? But this is a great way. It's really formatted nicely. So I withdrew 500. Here's my balance. Okay, so this is just my banking class, all right? I'll actually include this in the link in the description to the repo if you guys want to check this out. But I want to now structure this in a much better directory format. Okay, so I'm going to create two folders. I have my source code, which I'm going to actually put this inside. And then outside of the source, let's create test. These are all of my tests are going to be inside of here. All right. And you can see that I can, I think I have an extension turned on to where the source is now green. The tests are that red testing folder, cool extension. Okay. And we want to run these. Now inside test, here is where we can create our test main, just like before. All right. And this is where I'm going to write the unit tests that are actually going to store everything we need. And this is going to be done a bit differently. So I need to basically, I'm working in directories now. This is more structured. I need a way for my unit test to be able to speak to the main file, okay? Because they can't actually talk right now. So I'm going to import two things. I'm going to import system, sys, and we're going to import OS. Before I write this test, this could be done a few different ways. I could export the Python path. I could use pytest, but I'm just going to create the path and join them together using these two, okay? And so they're basically able to communicate with each other. So system path, I'm going to append, and we'll say os path as path, or not abs path, but that's what I was looking for. We can say os path join, os path join. Okay, what am I, or not join for this one, excuse me, I've already joined. My directory name is going to be the file. And then we are going to say here, ... Okay, that should actually handle it. I'm in the way, let me check. 1, 2, 3. Okay, so these are linking together those two files here. Okay, I'm gonna give some space here. Oops. Okay, there we go, I'm in the way. All right. So I've basically connected those two. Now we can carry on with everything as we had originally done. All right, so let's import unit test. This is my testing file. And I need to connect to our main file here. So I'm going to say from the source module, the main file, I would like to import a bank account. I'm going to pretty much import the two errors that we custom made to, negative amount error and insufficient funds error, just so I have access to them all. What's the next step in code testing? Well, let's create our class. So I'm going to create class test bank account, and we are going to pass in unit test case, just like before. Now, remember that our first one is going to be to set up. Okay, and inside here, this is going to create an instance for each test that we've run. For our sake, I will just be setting up the test, ... And then we are going to create a self. Let's just create my wallet. And let's say this is equal to our bank account. Inside here again, I will say Josh, and we will just say 1,000. So there's our setup. Right? Now I mentioned to you guys tear down, right? So this time, after every test, I'm just gonna take the instance away. This is what we could do here. On larger scales, we would want to do other cleanup, but I could just say wallet is none. So at the end of every test, the wallet is now none. And so it's not carrying over any information from the previous tests, right? Let's create a bunch of tests here. Let's create one to test initial deposit. I'm just going to label them all here and so we can get a good visualization. We will test deposit. It's not the initial one. Okay, we will withdraw. We are going to have insufficient funds. We are going to have a negative deposit, right? I mean, I'm just trying to think now, like what else could the person do to trigger an error? And all of these could occur, right? What happens if I try and negative deposit, negative withdraw. You can see my spelling here, but I'm just going to carry on. Okay. Let's say, what if the balance, I'll create one for balance changes as well. I think these are good for now. A bunch of tests, okay? Let's start off by creating our test initial deposit. Remember, everything for testing needs to start with the word test. Okay, so inside here, I want to do two things. I'm going to run two tests on the initial deposit. I'm going to make sure it's equal to something, okay? So what I can do here is we can say self.wallet.balance. The reason I'm saying balance is if I jump back here, that is my property right here. Okay, so I want to make sure it's equal to that. I'm going to say my balance is 100. Excuse me, I actually put 1,000 here. So that would throw me an error. Let's do another test. On the initial deposit, what else could I run on the initial deposit? Let's say assert true. All right, so what must be true here? Well, my wallet balance needs to be greater than or equal to 0. You can't have a negative balance. Well, you could with overdraft fees, right? But I'm not counting that here. I'll create a test for our deposit. And inside here, we're going to take our wallet. We are going to run the deposit method. Let's deposit $500 on top of that. Okay, so let's run our tests. Assert equal. And let's also run assert greater. So in assert equal, we can say self.wallet.balance. What should the balance be equal to now? It should be 1,500 because we have deposited inside of it now. Assert greater then, or greater, excuse me. So our balance should be greater than what? Well, it should be greater than 1,000 now because we've added information to it. Let's start by creating that test for withdrawal. Okay, and I'm going to do a few things here. So let's first save our amount that we had. So I'll be like, old amount is equal to, not emojis, go away. Our old amount is going to be self wallet. We can just say here balance. Okay, then let's take our wallet. Let's use the withdraw method. Let's try and withdraw $100. So currently I have what? 1,500. And after this, it's going to change. I'm going to assert equal. So what should this equal now? Self wallet balance. This should be, what am I at? 1,400. Okay. And another one, we are going to assert. Where is it? I have assert equal. I'm going to assert not equal as well. Okay. We're going to say self.wallet.balance. So what should it not equal? Well, it should not equal the old balance anymore. If the withdrawal method is working correctly, it shouldn't be the same thing. Okay, so both of those, it's going to run a test on those. Okay, we can run a test for insufficient funds. Okay, here we can actually say with self, I want to raise my own error that we made. And I imported the error insufficient funds error, right? So I made that. We can say wallet. We are going to try to withdraw. And inside withdraw, let's try and withdraw 10,000. Okay, that's a lot. That would raise a problem. I want to make sure my error is running correctly. Great. Now you're going to notice here, I forgot the word test actually. That would have been an issue. Test negative deposit. Okay, so inside me testing the negative deposit, we're going to say with, I want to assert my own error, right? And I'm going to say negative amount error. And inside there we'll say self wallet. We are going to what? Deposit. Let's try and deposit a negative amount. So negative 150. Problem. I can copy that here. Test negative withdraw. The only change here is from withdrawal, we are going to say this one, right? So let's just change the numbers for our sake. There we go. Cool. So I guess I could run two more. I've only used with you guys assert raises, the other two. Let me just show you how the other ones are done. So I'm just going to do one more. Let's do like test account holder. Okay, so let's say test account. I'll call it the same thing here. Holder self. And for this one, I'm going to say self.assert is none. Here we go. That's the one I want. And well, I need to actually make sure it's not none. So is not none. Because when we create an object, you need to have an account holder. Okay, so I can say self.wallet.account holder, just like that. And then the other one is going to be assert equal, right? Who should it be? So self.wallet.account holder. In this test case, it should be me, Josh, right? There we go, guys. So this is going to run and it's going to check to make sure everything's running accordingly, right? Assert equals, making sure the balances are equal. Assert true, is this true, right? So all of these tests should pass, and it's a way for us to implement that. Now remember at the bottom here, we're going to go if name is equal to our main. We're going to say unittest.main. We're ready to run our tests. Okay, so everything was roughly the same, except our example was new. But because I now have my directories structured, right, we do need to kind of join those paths together. Let's run our test. Voila, there we go. Okay, and so you can see I ran 7 tests. I had 2 failures, right? This is okay. I wanted us to see how those failures occurred, right? And so let's go up here. Which ones? Let's start with the test account holder, right? Josh is not equal to Josh. Okay, so if I go back here, up top I said capital J. That's my name, Josh. But as we know, Python doesn't see it that way. Lowercase j. That's why I triggered an error down here in my test account holder, right? It's not the same thing. Where else did I fail? Test withdrawal. Let's go up to test withdrawal. There we go. Okay. It's saying 900 is not equal to 1400. Why did that fail? Well, remember, on setup, every time we create a new object, it's not using the same data. At the bottom, when we have our teardown, it's resetting the whole process. In my withdrawal method, you can see the math I did. I said 1400 because I was going on 1500. That's not true because we've reset. This should be 900, right? Now that you've run your tests, let's retest it to make sure you're not getting any issues. Voila, you ran 7 tests, everything's running okay. You're now unit testing your code in Python.
Well, there you have it, guys. A little mini episode for you about writing tests using unit test. I really hope through these 2 examples, you got to see a few of the assets that come with the built-in module unit test and how you can get started today writing your own tests around the code you have. Maybe you're working on a project. This is a great time to practice and use testing within your project, because as you grow in the space, you're working on larger projects. You are going to know how to test your code properly before merging it with the larger code base. So that's what today's episode was about. Remember, guys, the first link in the description is my weekly Python newsletter. Head on down there, check it out. And if you felt you got value in today's episode, drop me a like. Why not? Well, guys, that's all for this week's episode of Code with Josh. Until next week, I will see you then.